I wasn't supposed to survive. Not because I was the smartest, or the fastest, or because I kept my cool when the others didn't. I survived because I saw less. I knew less. Or maybe, because I ran. They think I made it all up. The police. My parents. Even Jess's sister, who used to smile at me like I was her own little brother, now she won't return my messages. The report says we entered illegally, that the hospital was structurally unsound. No foul play. No traces of my friends. Just me, dehydrated, delirious, found curled up in the back seat of my car 3 days later with dirt under my fingernails and blood that wasn't mine on my sleeves. So I'm writing this down. Not for them. For anyone else who thinks it's a good idea to go poking around dead places. It started with a stupid dare. 4 of us. Me, Liam, Nate, the one with the idea, Jess, his girlfriend, and Marcus, my cousin and best friend since kindergarten. Nate was always into that urban explorer stuff, those grainy YouTube videos with abandoned schools, amusement parks, bunkers. He liked finding things that were supposed to be forgotten. And when he found out about the old Galloway psychiatric hospital, it was like something lit up in his brain. Closed down in '86 after patient abuse allegations, he said, reading from his phone as we passed around a warm 6-pack at the edge of a bonfire. Staff disappeared. Place is still locked up. No official demolition plans. Locals say it's cursed. He grinned. Perfect for Halloween weekend. I wish I'd punched him right then and there. We drove up Friday night. An hour north of town, tucked deep in the woods. The GPS lost signal about 5 miles from the site, and the road turned from cracked asphalt to gravel, then to dirt. Our phones lost service not long after. It felt like the trees themselves were trying to pull us in, like we were crossing some invisible line between civilization and something else. Jess was nervous, but Nate made her laugh, and that seemed to settle things. Marcus was quiet. He always got like that when we were far from cell towers, city kid to the bone. The hospital looked smaller than I expected, but more intimidating somehow. 3 stories of rotting brick and broken windows, wrapped in chain-link fencing. A rusted sign still hung crooked over the front steps, Galloway State Psychiatric Hospital. The front doors were chained shut. But Nate had already found another way in. There was a side entrance, half hidden by overgrowth. The door had been jimmied open before, probably by other kids who came looking for ghosts. The inside was musty, heavy with dust and mold, and the air had this thick, unmoving quality to it. We used headlamps and flashlights, cracking jokes to cover how unsettled we all felt. It wasn't a horror movie. There were no screams, no cold drafts, no shadows darting across the walls. But the silence. The silence was alive. And in that silence, as we stepped deeper inside, I swear I felt something shift. Like we were being noticed. We were just 4 idiots looking for a scare. But that building had been waiting. We split up. Not because we wanted to, but because that place had a way of splitting you without asking. At first, it was just exploration. Nate led us through the corridors, narrating like he was filming a documentary. These would have been the patient dorms, he said, sweeping his flashlight over peeling green paint and rusted bed frames. The floor creaked under our feet, and each sound seemed to echo too far, like the walls were amplifying it. I remember Jess trailing close to Nate, her fingers brushing the edge of his hoodie like she didn't want to lose contact. Marcus stuck beside me, his light flickering every now and then. We joked about ghosts draining batteries, but we didn't laugh much after that. The first time we heard it, we were near the old nurse's station. A faint knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps, coming from somewhere behind the wall. Knock, knock, knock. We froze. Nate spun toward the sound, like a bloodhound picking up a scent. Old pipes, he muttered, more to himself than to us. But pipes don't knock like someone waiting to be let in. Jess didn't say anything. She just backed up a step and looked at me. I gave her a shrug I hoped looked more confident than I felt. We moved on, but from that point, the hospital didn't feel empty anymore. We found an old map tacked behind a cracked glass panel, facility blueprint. Most of the ink had faded, but some parts were still legible. The building was bigger than it looked. 3 wings branching out from the central hall, like the arms of a crooked cross. One wing was marked patient housing, another medical, and the third maintenance. There were even basement levels marked off, though the stairwells down looked sealed. That should have been our first sign to leave. But Nate? His eyes lit up. We'll each take a wing, he said. See what's still left. Film it. Regroup in 20. Jess objected. No. Hell no. We stay together. But Nate was already handing her a walkie. We've got these. We'll stay in contact the whole time. It's just an abandoned building. I should have said something. Should have insisted we stick together. Instead, I followed Marcus down the hall toward maintenance, while Nate and Jess took the other 2 wings. I remember the moment Marcus turned the corner ahead of me, his flashlight catching a tangle of wires hanging from the ceiling, and then he was gone. Not in the dramatic, scream and vanish kind of way. Just not there anymore. I called his name. Once. Twice. Nothing. No echo. No footsteps. Just silence. Then my flashlight flickered, and I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it was right behind me. I spun so fast I nearly slipped on the dust-slick tiles. Nothing. Empty hallway. But it felt occupied. Like someone had just been standing behind me, breathing softly against my neck. I pressed the walkie. Static. I pressed again. Nate? Jess? You guys copy? More static, then a burst of garbled sound. A voice, maybe Jess's, but distorted. One word made it through. Help. Then silence. That was the last clear transmission I got from either of them. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, trying to convince myself it was a prank. That Marcus had just ducked into a room and was waiting to jump out and scare me. He always had that dumb laugh when he pulled something off, like a kid who couldn't believe he got away with it. But the hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I called his name again, louder this time. Marcus. Seriously, man, come on. My voice bounced down the corridor, came back empty. The silence pressed in tighter. I started checking rooms. One by one. Most were empty, maintenance closets, old storage rooms with cracked tiles and dust so thick it dulled my footsteps. A few had long dead machinery, rusted boilers, gurneys with their wheels missing, an overturned mop bucket fossilized in grime. But no sign of Marcus. Then, in one of the rooms near the end of the hall, I found something I didn't expect. A jacket. His jacket. The one he'd been wearing when we came in, army green, with the rip on the shoulder and the patch he'd sewn on from some old band. It was crumpled in the corner under a broken sink, like he just shrugged it off. But Marcus never took that jacket off. Even when it was too hot for it. I reached down to pick it up, and that's when I noticed something else. The room was cold. I mean really cold. Like walk-in freezer cold. The kind of chill that sinks into your skin and wraps around your spine. And then there was the smell. Not rot. Not mildew. Sterile. Like bleach. Like hospitals. Too clean, in a place that had no right being clean. That's when I saw it. Written in the grime on the cracked mirror above the sink. Why did you leave him? I staggered back so fast I nearly tripped over the doorframe. My light trembled in my hand, and for a moment the beam flailed across the ceiling, then the floor, then something. Something moved. Just outside the doorway. Not a shape, not a figure. Just the hint of movement. Like the air bent around something that didn't want to be seen. I didn't wait to find out. I bolted back into the corridor and ran. No plan. No direction. Just away. That's when I started noticing the doors. Some were closed when I passed them the first time. Now they were open. Just slightly, cracked enough to see darkness behind them, like eyes squinting open. One of them creaked, slow and deliberate, as I ran by. Knock, knock, knock. Again. But this time, it wasn't behind me. It was ahead. I skidded to a stop. The hallway in front of me was empty. Too empty. And then I heard footsteps. Not mine. Not echoing mine. Deliberate. Heavy. Measured. Coming closer. I ducked into the nearest room and shut the door as quietly as I could. Killed my flashlight. Pressed my back to the wall, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped. Right outside. And then, nothing. Just the ticking sound of my pulse in my ears, and the quiet hiss of my breath. I waited. I don't know how long. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 50. Eventually, I clicked the light back on. The hallway was empty again. But the door across from me, the one I know had been shut, was wide open now. I forced myself out of that room, though every part of me wanted to stay hidden. But hiding wasn't helping. Marcus was still gone. I hadn't heard from Jess or Nate. And someone, was moving through the halls. I needed to find them. Or at least, I needed to try. I backtracked toward the main hall, heart hammering like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. Every corner felt like it was hiding something just out of sight. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. I didn't trust it. I kept shaking it every few steps, like that would somehow keep it alive. That's when I heard the voice. Liam? It was faint. Just a whisper. But clear. Jess. I turned in place, swinging the light down an intersecting hallway to my right. Nothing. Then again, soft, urgent. Liam, please. It was definitely her. But off. Like it was coming from a speaker. Flattened. Filtered. Not natural. I followed it. Slowly at first, then quicker. The hallway narrowed the further I went. The tiles under my feet changed, no longer hospital flooring, but bare concrete. This wasn't patient space. This was utility. Service. Not meant for wandering. The voice kept calling. Softer. Sometimes repeating the same few words. Liam, help me, please, help me. I turned another corner and found an old intercom panel mounted to the wall. Cracked. Dead. But from somewhere behind it, I swear I heard her voice again. That's when it hit me. The hospital's PA system. They were using it. Whoever was in there. They were pulling us with voices we trusted. A trap. I backed away from the wall, flashlight trembling again. That's when I heard a sharp snap behind me, like a wire pulling tight. I spun, and for just a moment, my light caught something at the end of the hall. A figure. Very still. Very tall. Not moving. Not Nate. Not Marcus. Not Jess. My breath froze in my chest. I blinked. Gone. Nothing there. I don't remember running. I only remember that I was suddenly back in the central hallway again, panting, drenched in cold sweat. One of the double doors leading to the medical wing had been pried open now. I didn't open it. But I heard something through it. A low hum. Like a generator. And beneath that, movement. Not footsteps this time. Dragging. Like something heavy being pulled across tile. I raised the walkie again, even though I knew it was pointless. Jess? Nate? Can you hear me? Static. Then, Nate's voice, suddenly clear. Don't follow the lights. Stay out of the basement. They took her. The transmission cut off into a harsh squeal. I dropped the walkie. My hands were shaking too hard to hold it. They took her. Who? Who took her? And what the hell was in the basement? The basement. It was always going to end up there, wasn't it? Hospitals like Galloway were built with deep underlevels. Storage, boiler systems, laundry. Places that kept the building running but were meant to be unseen. Forgotten. And judging by Nate's voice, his panic, it was where they were keeping her. I found one of the stairwells marked. Service access, lower level. The door was warped but open. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It got thicker. Damper. The kind of air that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel like a swallowed mouthful of water. I clicked my flashlight to its highest setting and started down. The steps creaked under my weight, and each one seemed to go on just a little longer than it should have. Like the stairwell was stretching itself out. I told myself it was just my nerves. My sense of time and space had been wrecked for the past hour, or however long I'd been in that place. There were no windows. No light. When I reached the bottom, my beam lit up a metal door with a rusted label half torn from the surface. The only letters still visible were B_L_CK3. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges groaning like something alive. The basement corridor beyond was a different beast than the rest of the hospital. No peeling paint. No graffiti. The walls were clean. Too clean. A faint light buzzed from a strip of emergency lighting that somehow still worked, casting the corridor in a pale, bluish glow that made everything look sick. There were rooms lining both sides. Heavy steel doors with small, square windows. Observation rooms, maybe? Or isolation units. Some of the doors were ajar. I didn't want to look inside. But I did. The first few were empty. Just bare rooms, drain in the floor, a few with straps still bolted to the walls or floors. Signs of things that didn't belong in a hospital, not anymore. One had a chair. Not the medical kind. The restraint kind. Thick leather bands and rusted metal cuffs. But then I found the room with the recorder. A little handheld tape recorder. The kind therapists used back in the day. It was sitting on the floor just inside the doorway, blinking with a red light. I picked it up. Hit play. Static. Then a voice, Nate's. Recording this because I don't think I'm getting out. I don't know where Jess is. I saw something down here. It's not, look, if anyone finds this, don't trust the floor plan. It's wrong. They built more. Lower levels. Hidden. There was a sharp sound, like metal scraping concrete. Then a muffled scream. Nate's voice again, just 2 words before the tape cut. It watches. I stood frozen, tape recorder still in my hand. Then, thud. From somewhere further down the corridor. Then again. Thud, thud, thud. I turned off the recorder. Slowly backed away from the room. The hallway behind me was still empty. But the one ahead? A door at the far end slowly began to open. I didn't wait to see what was behind it. I turned and ran. The lights flickered as I went, casting long, spidery shadows across the walls. Behind me, the sound of something heavy dragging itself forward got louder. Closer. I reached the stairwell and slammed the door shut behind me, shoulder against it, heart in my throat. Silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. From the other side of the door. I didn't scream. Not yet. I just ran. I didn't go back to the main corridor. I couldn't. Something about the stairwell felt severed. Like I'd come back up into a different building entirely. The air was colder now. Sharper. And the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it listened. I needed to find Jess. Or Nate. Or at least proof they were still alive. And there was still one place we hadn't explored, the West Wing. Patient housing. That's where we should have started. Where the rumors came from. The stories Nate had pulled off those deep web forums, the experiments, the disappearances. The patients who were never transferred after the place shut down. Just vanished. I retraced my steps until I reached the locked wing. The metal door was still chained when we first arrived, padlock sealed tight. But now it hung open, chain dangling loose, swinging gently like it had just been let go. I should have turned around right then. Every instinct in me screamed it. But instincts don't mean much when your mind's cracking open from fear. So I stepped through. The smell hit me first. Not rot. Not mold. Something worse. Ammonia. Copper. And underneath it, old sweat. Like something had been pacing that hallway for a long, long time. The lights in this wing were dead, all of them. My flashlight cast its narrow beam across doors that were numbered but unlabeled. Every one shut, no windows. I pressed my ear to the nearest one and heard nothing. But when I pulled back, there was a smudge on the door. A handprint. Too small to be mine. Too fresh to be old. I kept moving. There were voices. Not clear ones. Muffled, like whispering through walls. Sometimes they sounded like Nate. Sometimes Jess. Sometimes. I couldn't tell. The hall curved in a way that didn't match the building's layout. Sharp turns where there shouldn't be. Dead ends that hadn't been on the blueprint. And every few minutes I'd pass a doorway I swore I'd already passed. Same peeling corner of wallpaper. Same scratch marks near the floor. It felt like the hospital was folding in on itself, reshaping behind me. Then I saw the light. Faint, flickering, from beneath one of the doors. I moved toward it slowly, quietly. I crouched, looking through the narrow gap at the bottom. Bare feet. Pale. Motionless. Facing away. Then they turned, stepping toward the door. I scrambled back just as the knob twitched like someone tried it from the other side. But the door didn't open. Instead, something slid under it. A photo. I stared at it in my hand. Polaroid. 4 people standing in front of Galloway Hospital. Smiling. Flash caught Jess mid-blink. Marcus throwing up a peace sign. Nate holding his phone up like a trophy. Me, half laughing. Only, something was wrong. There was a 5th person in the picture. In the background. Behind the front doors. Almost invisible in the shadowed glass. Tall. Thin. Barely a face. Just presence. I hadn't seen it when we took that photo. None of us had. My hand started shaking. I dropped the photo and ran. Didn't even notice I'd lost my flashlight until I was halfway back through the twisting corridor, heart racing, lungs burning, guided by the faint blue emergency light bleeding in from the hall I'd left behind. When I reached it, I turned back. The hallway I'd just come through was gone. Nothing but a blank wall now. And written across it, in something wet and dark, "You are last." I stood frozen in front of that wall, chest heaving. I don't know how long. The words were still wet. Whatever it was written with was dark and thick. Too dark for paint. And the way the letters dripped, like they were still bleeding. I couldn't process it. Not fully. My thoughts were a tangle of images. Marcus vanishing around the corner, Jess's voice crackling from a speaker, Nate's recording ending in a scream. They were gone. But not gone. I told myself maybe they were hiding. Maybe we'd all just gotten separated. That fear was making me see things, hear things. That the place wasn't haunted, just cleverly designed. Hallways that looped. Doors that misled. Optical illusions and panic. You can explain anything if you try hard enough. But what I couldn't explain was what came next. The static started in my teeth. That's the best way I can describe it. A faint buzzing, like the hum of a dying TV, deep in my jaw. Then it crawled into my ears, low and rising, until I realized it wasn't just a feeling. It was a sound. Real static. Like a detuned radio. I followed it. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. Like something behind it pulled. The sound led me to a narrow door half hidden behind a collapsed filing cabinet. The sign was missing, but the hinges were barely hanging on. I pushed it open. Inside was a room full of old monitors. CRT screens stacked against the walls, half of them cracked, others blinking with blue light. And in the center, a single operating chair, leather torn, straps dangling, bolted to the floor. I didn't want to look at the screens. But I did. They were cycling through camera feeds. Not security cameras. Old ones? Like from the 80s. Fuzzy, black and white footage of hospital rooms, corridors, stairwells. Some were empty. Some showed things. One screen showed the hallway I'd just come from. Still. Quiet. Until something passed through the frame. Just a blur, Fast. Human-shaped. But wrong. Moving like it didn't know how joints were supposed to work. Another screen showed the main entrance. Our group walking in. The footage played on a loop. We enter. We smile. We disappear behind the doors. Then it loops again. And again. Like the building was recording us. Then I saw it. One screen in the upper right. Black and white. A live feed of the room I was standing in. I stared at the screen. At myself. And then I wasn't alone. A second figure appeared behind me. Tall. Still. Just there. I spun around. Empty room. I looked back at the monitor. Only me. But I swear it was there. Just for a second. I backed out slowly, eyes on the monitor until the door frame swallowed it. I didn't run. Not yet. Something about that room, like I'd caught it off guard. Like I wasn't supposed to see what I saw. The static faded from my ears, but the dread didn't. It had settled in my bones now. Permanent. Familiar. Like it had been waiting for me to feel it all along. I had to get out. But the hospital wasn't done with me. The only thought pounding in my head was, there has to be a way out. Not through the hall we came in. Somehow, that entrance no longer existed. I checked the central corridor again. Same layout. Same doors. But the front lobby? Gone. In its place was a collapsed ceiling, and what looked like a solid wall of cinder blocks behind broken plaster. The place had closed itself around me. Still, I kept moving. Not because I had hope, but because stopping meant facing whatever had followed us in. Or whatever had always been there. I found Jess's necklace first. Lying in the middle of a hallway. A thin silver chain with a little crescent moon. She wore it every day. Said it reminded her to stay soft, even in the dark. That was the first time I cried. Just for a second. The second thing I found was Nate's phone, screen cracked, battery barely hanging on, wedged between two broken tiles like it had been dropped mid-run. I powered it on and checked the camera roll. Photos. Blurry rushed. Mostly hallways. Walls. One shot of a stairwell, motion blur in the corner like something moving too fast. And one last video. I hit play. The flashlight beam shook wildly across the floor. Nate's voice, panting hard. They took her. I saw it. God, Jess, she was right behind me and then, it just opened up. The F***king wall opened. Then he turned the camera. The video caught a glimpse of a face. Not a human one. It was wrong. Half in shadow. Something stretched too long across it. Teeth? Or just the illusion of them? Then static. Screams. The feed cut. And that was the last trace of him. I stood there with his phone pressed to my chest like it could keep me grounded, and then I heard the worst sound of the entire night. Footsteps. Not far. Just around the corner. But they were soft. Careful. Not dragging. Not wild. Deliberate. I whispered. Jess? No answer. Marcus. Still nothing. But I knew, that whatever rounded that corner wouldn't be someone I loved. So I ran. One last time. And I found the only open door I hadn't tried. A maintenance tunnel. Narrow. Low ceiling. A rusted pipe leaked along the wall. I followed it, hunched, tripping over debris, scraping my palms raw on concrete. Then, light. Faint. Natural. A sliver of moonlight bleeding through a broken vent. I clawed at the grating until my fingers bled, bent the metal until it screamed. And I got out. I staggered into the woods. No flashlight. No phone. Just me and the sound of leaves crunching under my boots, every breath feeling like it would wake something up again. I didn't stop until I found my car. Still there. Still unlocked. Like none of it had happened. I collapsed in the back seat and passed out. They found me 3 days later. Hypothermic. Dehydrated. Half-conscious. I told them everything, through chattering teeth and cracked lips. And they listened. Nodded. Took notes. Then said there was nothing there? When the police searched Galloway, they found the outer structure, but the wing I described? Gone. The tunnels? Didn't exist. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No bodies. No Jess. No Marcus. No Nate. Just me. I was held for 72 hours under psychiatric observation. It was protocol, they said. No one said the word crazy out loud, but they didn't have to. I saw it in their eyes. Eventually they let me go. Back into the world. Back into normal. But I'm not normal anymore. None of this is. I can't sleep with the lights off. I can't stand silence. Every knock on the wall sends me into a panic. I hear whispers through static, and sometimes I see my friends in crowds, just for a second. Then they're gone. Like they never existed. That's why I'm writing this now. Not because I think you'll believe me, but because someone needs to know what happened at Galloway. Before someone else goes looking. Before the place opens its doors again. Because it will. And next time, maybe no one gets out.